everybody. When I found out I was speaking at CMX and I was agreed to talk on a pretty personal topic, I was excited and then I got terrified. And then I saw this lovely intimate room and I was like, thank God. Thank God for this. So I'm really, really happy to be here with you. I'm gonna talk a little bit about myself. I don't know how you feel. I know this is a work conference, we're gonna talk about work, but my work is one of the least interesting things about me. It's like my weight or what I had for breakfast, it's just some facts. So I'm Evelyn, I'm Canadian, I'm from Toronto. Any other Canadians here? 1, 2, woohoo! Yeah, we stick together, we tend to go in packs. I have an American husband, he's very annoying. I have 2 kids, they're very cute. I just got a dog that is like this big and is going to be able to pull me around the entire world. I like gin martinis, I like ramen, and I like talking to people after this sort of thing. So please come up and say hi. I don't know very many people here at all. We're gonna talk a little bit about my work, obviously. I was at Movember and Yelp during their times of highest growth. After my time at Yelp, I moved on to working at small stage startups. So we're gonna talk a lot about those newer startups, those seed round, Series A round type of place. Who here is at a startup that is that small or intimate or new? Yeah? Yeah? Who has been at one at this phase? Okay, good. So I'm gonna say some things that are gonna make sense to at least most of you. All right, let me check the notes here. Now, let's really talk about what an early stage startup is. It's exhausting. You don't have one job. You've got about 11 jobs. I don't know about you, but I really am drawn to doing a lot of things. So right now, I'm sort of a head of community, kind of a head of brand, a little bit of a head of content, a little bit of a head of product. I also handle all customer support tickets. And these are things that normally don't fall under head of community when you come from somewhere like Movember or Yelp, where I had previously, where I just had my lovely little island of, this is my community. I do things to engage this community. I am judged on engaging this community. I'm also now doing things like having 40-minute arguments with someone about what purple we need on the website. I'm not kidding. There are 60 Slack messages back and forth. In the end, we chose the correct purple. Thank gosh, everything worked out just fine. But that's the sort of stuff that happens at a newer stage startup. There's also a really big pull to be many, 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 many things. So what do you want to take on? What can you take on? This is not a sexy answer, but I believe that you probably should do, obviously, all of the community stuff, your bread and butter, the stuff that gets you out of bed in the morning, and then you should also take on the stuff you're good at and you do really quickly. So for me, I'm going to use the example of newsletters. I hate writing newsletters. I've written over 1,000 newsletters. That's not a joke. Shout out to anyone who worked at Yelp. I've easily written 1,000 newsletters, but I know I can do that in 2 hours. So then I know that I can support the other stakeholders, I can support the C-suite, and we can move things along. What is not a great idea to do is to take on something that you're really, really interested in, but maybe just have like a LinkedIn certificate. For me, that's visuals. Honestly, thank God for Canva. Monica's here. You should see her later. You can tell by my slides. This is not my area. I rely completely on people for anything visual, anything video related. And I'm okay with that. I also am mediocre with data. So that's another thing. I use a lot of my budget towards CRMs so that I can quickly float the information I need to do my job well. What can you take on? Well, pretty much everything you can do quickly, and everything else they ask you to do, within reason. Don't say yes to sales. Has anyone ever somehow ended up in a situation where you're doing lead gen? Yes. Yes, cool. It's okay, it's fun. Like I said, I like writing, I like content, so I'll get involved and really get into that side of things. But then at the last startup I was at, Subkit, we ended up needing me to take like 2 or 3 sales calls, and I was writing some lead gen materials. And guess what? The calls went well. Because you know what? If you work in community, you're gonna slay at sales. Because you're gonna be nice. You're gonna talk to people, you're actually gonna care about them, you're gonna ask them questions, and then one thing leads to another, and all of a sudden, I'm doing 20 fucking hours of sales calls a week Well, no, it is funny. We should all laugh at that. It was a horrible outcome. And then I had 40 other hours of work that was just the community stuff and that other stuff that I was taking on. All right. This one is a big one for me. It got its own slide. I genuinely believe that definitions save lives and data doesn't. Come at me. I know a lot of people in marketing will be like, it's all about that data. But when you're at an earlier stage startup, when you're in that seed round, that Series A, when you're having conversations about launching new things, the data simply doesn't exist yet. It doesn't. If you're solving a problem that's not been solved before, there's not going to be data for it. You're going to have some really good educated guesses. You're going to have a case study or two. You're going to have some user feedback loops, things of that nature, but you're not going to have some HubSpot sheet or some Tableau work that's just like proof that you need to do this right now. But what you do hopefully have is a North Star community metric that you're working closely with your C-suite to get things done. You're working towards one big goal, hopefully. If they ask you to do 2, fine. 3, quit. Just leave. But definitions can save. And I don't mean like defining every word in the lexicon, but do you and your CEO mean the same thing when you say active user? Do you and the head of product mean the same thing when you mean engaged community member? Do you know that for a fact? Because you really have to qualify those moments. And just having those conversations, speaking the exact same language, will allow you to be a little more persuasive and a little bit more able to get things to where they need to go. Again, sometimes the data just isn't there, but you were a data point. Like the first time I came to an early stage startup, I'd been in community for 12 years. I was a data point. I was too afraid to say it. I'm no longer afraid to say that, but my experience is a very, very relevant data point, and so is yours. Okay, we're gonna shift together here a little bit. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. We're gonna talk about what it's like to be working in community, having to be joyful, build these spaces, lift everyone up when the shit fucking hits the fan, and it always does. So who here has had a traumatic life event since they've been in community? That is not everyone. I was so confident I was gonna get to say everyone, but that was like 95% of the room. It happens, grief happens. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to just stop and drop and figure it out. So I'm gonna get personal. I probably might tear up, but I'm really okay. We're not, none of us is okay. We're all humans, but you know what I mean? I'm gonna move right past it if I do. 15 months ago, my husband and I lost a child. Thank you. That is the sound I normally get at this part of this conversation. It was not easy for me. It was not easy for my family. I was halfway through a pregnancy, so I didn't have a miscarriage, but I didn't have a stillbirth either. So I was in this in-between phase. I was hospitalized for a while. My kids were having a hard time. I'm just gonna say Chrissy Teigen. Does everyone know who that is? Okay, bless that famous woman, because I don't have to explain it anymore, because she did. She did a wonderful job of explaining what it's like to lose a child pretty far in a pregnancy. And if you don't follow her on the internet, she's also pretty funny. So you can learn a lot from her. I don't have to go into everything. I am gonna check my notes though, because that part of the conversation always takes me away. And I don't think you'd be surprised by that. All right, okay, I'm back. I know where I was. So after this happened, I took 2 weeks off work. Well, I wrote an email when I was really, really high on God knows what they give you at the hospital and said, this happened, I'm gonna take 2 weeks off work, I'll see you Monday, the blah, blah, blah of August. Of course, I got like lovely notes back, everyone was very understanding. I've since reread the email, there was not a typo in it. Like whatever like hormones mothers have in them are amazing, because I was on like, I think I was on like fentanyl, like the actual drips that like really could really hurt you if you didn't actually need them. The email was fine. My husband looked me right in the eye and said, that's insane. You're not going back to work in 2 weeks? And I was like, John, like, it's fine. Miscarriages happen, things happen. Because I was kind of delulu about what had actually just gone down. Again, meds are great. It was the night before I was meant to go back to work. No one is surprised. I sent an email that was just like, hey, I'm not coming back tomorrow. I'm gonna need a lot more time. I'm so lucky to live in Canada, so I could be paid 15 weeks by the government as a sick leave. Yay, Canada, woo. So that was offered to me. My CEO, not Canadian. So I had to like send him links and all this. They were about to do a raise. We were about to get our Series A. Things were going ahead. But the idea of me not being there for 15 weeks freaked him out. So he decided we should have a meeting every 2 weeks to see if I'm ready to come back, because maybe I don't need the whole 15 weeks. So that was a huge red flag for me, but I was being paid to not be there while we did these check-ins, so I kind of let it ride for one. I did a horribly embarrassing, tearful check-in where they were like, okay, we'll check in next week. They tried to make the check-ins closer together. I eventually just wrote them an email that was like, you can package me out, because I'm not gonna keep doing this to myself, and you clearly aren't doing the government Canadian paperwork. So I quit. That was really a big release. I missed the work I was doing. They did get their round of funding. I'm happy for them, but I never want to look at that man again, because the farther away you get, the more you're just like, who are you? And also that person happens to have children, so it was like extra bizarre to me that the money was going so much farther than the human element of it. That's one thing about early stage startups that I really miss. Human resources. Human resources slaps. Like if you have something real happening in your life, don't be afraid of them. The people department, if you are super bigger, they are there for you, and I didn't have that. So I took 4 months off, and all the tech layoffs started to happen, okay? So I had a lot of cool opportunities. Some of them were in AI, things that just didn't quite interest me, and then there was an early stage startup, and I was drawn to it because I knew I'd learned a lot at the last one, and the other reason I was drawn to it is a little embarrassing, but I'm just gonna be honest, control. Who doesn't like to control things from top to tail? If you're somewhere that's early stage, you have a lot of control over a lot of massive projects, and I really like that. It's not like my best quality, but it's definitely one that I've kind of sunk into. Previously, we talked about what you can take on and what you can't take on at an early stage startup and just guarding your time. I was not the same person. My first quarterly review at the job I'm at now, which is going really well. The community now has 2,500 people. Things are coming along, very happy. Everyone's happy. First quarterly review, I was called bossy, which I am. That's true. That's fine. I'd heard that one before. But I was also called reactive and argumentative, which made me stop, because I was like, no, I'm a nice girl from Nova Scotia. You're fucking wrong. I'm really nice. Everyone knows I'm really nice. And then I realized, no, I wasn't. I wasn't that person anymore. I said, like, if I saw our tech stack was getting too big, I'd raise my hand and be like, can you trim that down? We have to speak the same language. If I saw definitions going awry and people expecting me to be nimble and change, I'd be like, no, you come to me. I know what I'm talking about. This is a new part of my personality that I really have come to appreciate, because when something horrible happens to you, you reevaluate everything. And I'm not gonna waste my work time doing 20 hours of sales calls ever again. And I'm not gonna waste someone else's time who's paying me a lot of money because I'm a community expert to placate them for 2 months and then just do what I knew we were supposed to do in the first place. Woo! Yeah, I am a data point. You are a data point. I still take on way too much, way too much stuff, but I've narrowed it even more. So before, when I said, head of customer support tickets, head of brand, head of content, now I just stick to the writing stuff and the product marketing stuff, which is the user feedback loops. Those are things I'm good at, they're things I like. I'm getting stronger. Now I'm back to maybe, let's say, 80%, so I can juggle like 3 balls. I'm sure soon I'll be comfortable with a 4th ball, and then maybe a 5th. But I also now have boundaries that are made of steel. Do I nap at 2 p.m. if I need to? Yeah, I did. I do. Do it all the time. Did I not send these slides in on time because I was like, no, I need tonight with my kids? Sure did. Sorry to the folks at CMX. These were very late coming in. They're very dry and very late. So just remember to make those boundaries for yourself. And at early stage startups, communicate. I've had the most awkward chats, like way more awkward than anything I've said so far, if you can believe it. Like I've told my CEO after that quarterly review, I was like, okay, cool, I hear you, I will work on these things. Whatever, I'm working on it, whatever, we're working. I'm working on how I present those parts of myself more like it. But I also said, I need more positive feedback. And they were like, what? They come from venture capital firms. They're a really lovely man. He's a really lovely man, but he comes from VC. He doesn't give compliments, he gives like only criticisms. That's just how he was raised. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna need more positive reinforcement. And I just said that, and he looked at me like, you can't tell me how to manage. I was like, I'm telling you how I need to be managed. These conversations are awkward, and guess what? We had it, and now he makes a point of being like, that newsletter slapped. Thank you, it did. I worked really hard on it. Moving right along with your day, you know what I mean? Advocate for what you need, and communicate, I'm having a bad day, I need a mental health day. I know, I think it's harder in America than it is in Canada. In Canada, mental health days are kind of baked in, but I promise you, if you tell someone, I need a mental health day, they're gonna let you have it. They're not gonna ask questions. Especially if you're a woman, they're gonna be a little scared and just like not wanna know. It's been my experience, unfortunately, for better or worse. But just ask for it and take it. Because there's no such thing as a community management emergency. There's just not. But there is such thing as a human emergency. So take care of yourselves. I have 7 minutes left. Talked fast, I do that. Does anyone wanna ask any questions about early stage startups? Talk about their own grief experiences? Anyone want to connect here? No. Yeah.
Did you manage a team when you were going through this grief process?
I did. Thank you. That's actually a really good question. And I think I mentioned it in my notes over here. I had 5 people on my team, and they were all quite senior. But I was the go-between between this, the CEO and them. And as you might have gotten from this story, and I'm not naming names, you can check LinkedIn if you want to, but I'm not naming names, it could be quite prickly. And so when I left, I think there was a lot of attrition, but I did manage a social media manager, a content person, and a customer support person, as well as partnerships.
And how did you kind of share, address your grief, and kind of
Yeah.
what you were going through with them?
So that's a great question. I've since talked to them. When I was making the decision not to come back, I was then able to. Unfortunately, there are certain things in life that happen, like the CEO and the head of growth just got an email, and I was like, see you in 2 weeks. And then when these conversations started to happen, I talked to them all individually, just via text or WhatsApp, out of the work sphere, and was very honest with them that I could not see necessarily a path forward for me there. But I'm here if they need any support. I've been references for 3 of them, who all work other places now, and they're all great. And I hope that they learn from me that, like, if something really shitty happens, who cares about work? Like, I get it, it's hard financially, like, it can be really stressful. I use my line of credit to pay my half of the mortgage a month. Like, it can be extraordinarily stressful, but it also doesn't matter as much as your mental health does. Nothing does. Yeah.
So grief is, there's no linear process.
Yeah.
Like, how did you know you were ready to go back to work and to building community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So she said grief is not a linear process, and that's completely true. It can be very up and down. My dad died when I was 19. I now function obviously very normally day to day, love him, but it's not a part of it. But then, you know, once you hit an anniversary or you hear a song or something and it hits you like a wave the same way. I went back to work a little too early. You could probably tell by that quarterly review I talked about, a little too early, but there were tech layoffs. I didn't have a choice. I felt really anxious at the idea of like more and more of you entering my pool when I was like already so aware I was gonna interview poorly, or at least not as like fun as normal. So for me, I felt forced into it. The other thing I'd say is like, stay off as long as you're financially able, which is a privileged thing to say, but I mean, like, it's what I think. And yeah, I know now that am 100% ready to be back at work because I'm comfortable giving this talk, though. So I think if you can get through these stories, if you can come out with learnings from what happened, you're kind of on the other side. That's what I think. You, then you.
So as a manager
Yeah.
of people,
Yeah. You manage people.
I've managed people, I've been through grief, and it
Yeah.
informs how you manage people. So
Yeah.
I would love to hear how it's changed how you manage people who are going through situations, and how people who manage others can be better managers
Right.
for people in these moments.
Yes. So the number one piece of advice is ask questions, don't give advice. So how are you feeling? Do you want to talk about it? Do you need extra time? What can I do to support you? I start from that space. It's really easy, especially as community builders, to try to mirror and to be like, oh, I relate because I went through this, and we're constantly performing and trying to get things going and keep things up, and you know what I mean? But For this, it changed me in the way that I ask a lot more questions. If I don't like not if I don't like an answer, but let's say something has happened or like someone's underperforming, I think about it and sleep on it for at least 24 hours. Just give yourself enough time to empathize and be human with it, because again, you don't know what people are going through behind closed doors. You only know what they tell them. So ask questions, be empathetic, and if things are hitting the fan at work, maybe because of something happening in their life or maybe not, just wait 24 hours. Oh, and only talk in person. Like, save those conversations for real moments. Like, that's not for Slack. That's not for email. That's not even for voice messages. Like, that's for, like, you can see their eyes. Through a screen if it has to be, but through eyes. Last question. I have a feeling they're going to tell me.
You said you have boundaries of steel.
I do.
How do you go about reinforcing those boundaries, especially when it's a senior who might be coaching?
Yeah, so this is probably, again, that first quarterly review, you're a little argumentative, you're a little prickly or whatever. Like, yeah, because I have the boundary up. I often use the phrase, let me think about that. Because whatever that work emergency is, that they're crossing a boundary into my evenings or into a weird time of my day, let me think about that. Usually they'll figure it out on their own, or they'll diffuse, or they'll realize, oh, I called her at 8 p.m. and she's putting 2 kids to bed right now, and her husband's on a work trip. Like, they hopefully figure it out on their own. But in general, the best thing to do for boundaries is to just be consistent. So if I get a question after 6 p.m., like, truly I will take an emergency. Again, there's no real work emergency, but if something's like the website's broken, like, obviously I'll talk to someone. But I consistently say, let me think about that after sort of 5:30 p.m. Let me think about that. And then at 8:30 the next day or whenever I'm back online, that's when I'll answer it. And if you are just consistent with that, eventually people will get that. And if someone calls out that behavior, that you're offline during your family or personal time, then that's a red flag. Like that, you might want to think about working for that person. But just be consistent, and then eventually people will pick up on your patterns. And they're good patterns. Like, everyone works better when they take care of themselves better. All right, we're down to a minute, so thank you so much. Is there one more question?
There's one right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this isn't particularly to managing your own grief, but also for when grief is inside your actual community.
Yeah.
I work for a product-based community, and so there's certain times where I receive tickets or requests from people who are going through, emergency human situations, like you said, and so it's kind of difficult whenever I try to advocate from my end to policy over empathy.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's kind of hard to reach up to like senior people. It's like, and so they've been overcharged for something that they've not been using because they've been in this grief situation.
Yeah.
So, what would be the best way to advocate? Situations of like, hey, like this person's going through a hard time, and I know this is policy, but can we make an exception given the circumstances?
That's a really great question. That probably has come up a lot for anyone who does like subscription products during COVID and then into whatever the hell this great firing or whatever we want to call it is. I think that, one, if it's consistent, I would ask to have it put in my budget. I would ask for a budget line that was like the human fund, like Seinfeld, like George Costanza, but like where you would like, I think I would advocate for that, and then like keep the receipts, like screen grabs like this happened 3 or 4 times, and I had to have this, you can't go back in time and fix that, but you can make sure in the future that you've got the ability to do that. Policies are policies though, so don't advertise the policies because, I don't know, but that would be my advice to you, is to try to get it baked into some kind of budget.
Okay.
Does anyone have a better answer than that? I feel like this room might have better answers than that.
I was thinking if you took like the swag budget and actually, rather than sending someone crap they don't want,
Boom.
actually gave them it.
Save the environment and help a human. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna leave it at that. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, I'm sorry.